goes. Perfect. To make this ramp, I've only got a few cuts to do, so I opted to go with the jigsaw. The only downside to using a jigsaw is you can never usually get it perfect. In fact, no, you can never get it perfect. So, belt sander. To assemble this little ramp, I'm going to use basic timber screws, nothing fancy. It's a handy little thing, this. They're usually used by cabinet makers, kitchen cabinet makers and things like that. It drills the hole and pre-countersinks it pretty much for that size head. So, awesome little tool, saves you a little bit of time. So basically all I did here to fix the problem with the actual ramp separating from the flat top is I notched one piece of timber in the center and then made that one the same as the notch height and then stuck that one on there just for extra support. And what that does is it catches the top of the frame here and it locks into place, much like this. So as it comes down, it locks in, so the ramp can never be separated when it's in the down position. So the last thing to do is to make a front wheel clamp for this bed, and what I'm using is the same material that I had for the frame, just because I had it, 75 by 25. Now what I did was I've capped the ends and I've also cut this on an angle and welded it up, left a decent gap so that I could get heaps of penetration and then grind them flush. So what I've done here so far is basically two pieces of angle welded on, drilled the holes through the actual deck, lined them all up, and I've also put an extra leg out there for just extra strength for when you do clamp the front wheel. I just think it needed it. I've just welded one of these nuts to the end of this. This basically is just to lift up. I might bring this down a little bit just to protect the thread while I'm welding, because the spatter has a tendency to get stuck to it and destroy the thread and causes you havoc later on. So that's what I ended up with. Basically a nut welded on the end of that and then filled in with weld. So that's all tight as. Basically a foot on that with a nut that has been ground down to basically like a collar, and that's welded to the actual the rod, the threaded rod. And there's also a nut on that welded, but that's been drilled out so that it's free, and then the threaded rod stops there. It goes all the way through, stops there, and it's got basically a nut welded on the end of it that's been ground down as well. So I think what was happening there just before was the lower end, this end, was actually because I hadn't put the blocks under it. So I think it was like the bottom compared to the bottom one. I think the top one was like this. So it was physically just unable to pull. So as soon as I put the jack under it and gave it a little bit of elevation from the back and made it level, then all of a sudden it pulled up. So I think that's what was happening. It seemed to work as soon as I put the jack under it, it started to rise. So something to keep in mind if you ever build one of these things. Always try and make sure the top and the bottom deck are parallel, level with each other. So otherwise it just seems to have a bit of an issue. But it's up and I'm pretty excited about it. It worked. It's a couple of days worth of work and it's looking good. So it's at a good height now for me to work on, so I can get started into my my cafe racer.